I hope. Whenever you're good to start.
Hi guys, so we are going to be talking about motor pathways in the spinal cord. I'll start off with the motor pathways and then Rohan will finish off and also talk about the lesions and yeah. So, as in, just to introduce it, this tends to be kind of an intimidating topic, but it's just a few pathways that you need to memorize. It's just repetition, that's it. So your motor pathways are the descending ones. The ascending ones are sensory, descending motor, and they're responsible for controlling and coordinating movements in the body. You can split it into two. There's the corticospinal tract and the extrapyramidal system. The difference is just where they originate. Corticospinal originates in the cortex, and the extrapyramidal system is subcortical. You need to remember that this one is voluntary and this one's involuntary. The two types of corticospinal ones are anterior and lateral. This is just how they split. I'll talk about it in more detail later on. And there are 4 extrapyramidal ones. So the corticospinal tract. What is the function? Voluntary movement. And remember, it's on the opposite side. And you can see that in the diagram here. Although it starts off on the right, it ends up in the left. So the control is on the opposite side. You receive input from the primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, and the supplementary area. And then this is the pathway. You just got to memorize it. That's it. So it goes from the cortex, then the internal capsule. I think it's the posterior limb of the internal capsule, then the crus cerebri of the midbrain, the pons, the medulla, and the medulla is where it decussates. You can see the decussation here. And when it decussates, 90% of the fibers, they go to the lateral side, and 10% stay anterior. So that's what makes up the two different tracts. The lateral one, like I mentioned, it's 90%. It decussates at the pyramidal decussation, and it goes down, terminates in the ventral horn over here, and then it'll synapse with the lower motor neurons, and it innervates the limb muscles, specifically the distal parts of the limbs. The anterior one, on the other hand, the main difference that you need to try and remember is the lateral goes to the limb muscles, whereas the anterior goes to the axial musculature, so like the trunk muscles and the abdominal ones. This one stays on the same sides, and then it decussates towards the end. Yeah, that's about it there. And then let's talk about the corticobulbar and the corticonuclear tracts. Now, they start from the cortex and they end in various different nuclei. So I've listed them here just to make it easier. And they are responsible mainly to control the muscles of the face. So the ones that end in the trigeminal nerve nucleus, they are responsible for the muscles of mastication, the facial nerve nucleus, the muscles of facial expression, nucleus ambiguus, soft palate muscles, the uvula, the pharynx, and the larynx. So it's what controls the speech, the muscles that are responsible for speech, and hypoglossal muscles for the tongue. And so most of these fibers, when they go down, I think you can see it in the picture, you can see that they innervate bilaterally, but there are a few exceptions, and I've mentioned them here. So there's the upper motor neurons for the facial nerve. This one only affects the muscles that are below the eyes, and the motor neurons for the hypoglossal nerve as well. They, again, contralateral innervation. And this is important when it comes to injuries, which Rohan will talk about later. So you can see them here. And that's that. Moving on, rubrospinal. So this is one of the first of the extrapyramidal tracts. The function is to stimulate your upper limb flexors, and origin is red nucleus in the midbrain. You can see it here. The stimuli, it's more or less the same for almost all of them, and the ends up in the cerebellum nuclei, the globus, and the emboliform, and they cross again, and where they cross, it's called the ventral tegmental decussation, and they descend down, and they stimulate neurons in the anterior gray horn, which in the end are responsible for the upper limb flexor muscles. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the reticulospinal tract. So its function basically, it controls movement and posture. So that's its primary function. So think of the reticulospinal tract as your strict gym instructor who tell you to like stand upright with your shoulders straight. So it's important for your posture, but also is important for controlling your autonomic function. So your heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, etc. It's not that well studied, but it's like I think it's proven that it does control some of your autonomic fibers. So basically the input of the reticulospinal tract, so from various ascending tracts, your cortex, your cerebellum, and you guys just need to remember, so when you're talking about these extra pyramidal tracts, they are involuntary, so they're always firing, even though when you're not conscious or you're not consciously doing a movement, it's still always firing. So the reticulospinal tract, we can divide it into a pontine, which is medial. It's the one that's red in the diagram, and a medullary one, so that's more lateral in the spinal cord, and if you do a cross section. So the pontine, it starts from the pontine reticular formation, goes downwards. It doesn't cross, so it remains ipsilateral. And it synapses at your alpha and gamma motor neurons, so your anterior horn of the spinal cord. And it synapses with the motor neurons of your extensor muscles, and it inhibits the flexors of your trunk and proximal muscles. So the pontine tract is more for extension, and the medullary, so starts from the medullary reticular formation. It moves contralateral, so it crosses. And the same thing, so alpha motor neurons, but in this case, it activates your flexor muscles and inhibits the extensors. So basically, it inhibits the pontine reticulospinal tract. Okay. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, vestibulospinal tract. Again, controls balance and posture. So just think, what's the function of your vestibule? It's involved in balance. So information from the vestibular system, it gets information from the vestibular system, your vestigial nucleus, so your cerebellum and basal ganglia as well. And we divide it into medial and lateral. So the medial tract, it's more medial, obviously, and it goes to motor neurons of your neck and upper limbs. So it stabilizes your head and neck during movements. So even when you're, say, playing football or I don't know what, your head and neck needs to be stable. Or if you're looking at something, you're like, you need to fix your gaze, but even though you're moving. So there's examples like that is its function. The lateral one begins from the lateral vestibular nuclei, and it goes to motor neurons of the ipsilateral extensor muscles and inhibition of flexors, sorry. So basically just erect body posture and balance. Next, please. Yeah, thanks. Okay, tectospinal. So the function of this tract, it controls reflexive head and neck movements in response to either visual or auditory stimuli. So we have the superior colliculus. So through the superior colliculus, it receives auditory and visual stimuli. This might sound a little confusing because the superior colliculus, as you will probably find out in the brainstem topics, I guess, is only involved in visual stimuli, but in this pathway, we're just talking about it receives auditory stimuli, but it's not involved in auditory processing. That's your inferior colliculus. So in this tract, just through the superior colliculus, it receives these like whatever auditory or visual stimuli that you get from your retina and any other association centers in your cortex. And from there, it moves contralaterally to the anterior gray horn of just your cervical and upper thoracic portions of the spinal cord. So this tract is pretty important for protection and any task that requires like visual and auditory guidance. So like the next time your friend sneaks up behind you and says boo, it's this tract that fires up and I don't know, prevents you from getting a heart attack, I guess. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this is part of your question, motor deficiencies in spinal cord lesions. Basically, in this, it'll be good if you guys just remember what an upper motor neuron is and what a lower motor neuron. So an upper motor neuron is basically the neuron that's where the cell body is from the cortex, and it goes all the way till your lower motor neuron, which is in your anterior gray horn. So in an upper motor neuron lesion, it can be a lesion anywhere along this pathway. So from the cortex down just above where the cell body is in the anterior cell horn. So if you have a lesion in this area, you'll get weakness, obviously, and spasticity. So spasticity is basically just increased muscle tone and hyperreflexia. It's important to know that these upper motor neurons are responsible for sending signals to your lower motor neurons and controls like voluntary movements, as Nihar said before. Okay, next, please. Yeah, and then we have the lower motor neuron. So this can be damage to the neuron itself or the nerves that connect them to muscles. So anywhere from that neuron in the anterior motor horn till the muscle, if the nerve gets damaged, we classify that as a lower motor neuron lesion. So in this case, you'd also have muscle weakness. So in any upper or lower motor neuron lesion, you'll have muscle weakness, but the other manifestations are different. So in this case, you'll have atrophy. Atrophy basically means you lose muscle mass. Your muscle tone will be decreased, so the patient's muscles would be like flaccid. You'd have decreased or maybe absent reflexes and fasciculations. Fasciculations is involuntary muscle twitching. And the way I think of it is if you have a lesion in your lower motor neuron, the nerves are trying to figure it's like their connections to the muscles and they kind of make new connections and they don't have that control. So your muscles will just start twitching involuntary. And unlike upper motor neuron deficits, the lower motor neurons typically only affect the muscles that are innervated. And that kind of makes sense. If you cut the nerve that it just innervates one muscle, only that muscle will be affected. Yeah, and that's basically it for our topic. A lot of facts to memorize and pathways, but they're pretty similar, especially the extrapyramidal ones. And anything important to remember?
I think that's pretty much it. The Ninja Nerd videos for this are really good, so make sure you watch those. Yeah, it's just memorization. Go over it again and again until it's in your head.
And if you guys have any doubts from this presentation, don't hesitate to hit any one of us up for any doubts that you might have. Yeah. Right. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. Bye.